Dan Abrams filling in for Geraldo Rivera. Later in the program, we'll continue our examination of the crimes of the century with a look at this disturbing phenomenon of young people who kill, such as Columbine shooters Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold.
This is Dylan Klebold, little sound guy we used to have. What's the stupidest thing Missy has ever done?
I'd have to say that would be a combination of stupid and funny. During one of the performances, the musical, I think it was The Music Man, Zach was on lights, I was doing sound, and we had the little headsets, and we got her to successfully bitch out the entire cast in the dressing room.
Months after that home video of a seemingly normal Dylan Klebold was taped, he and his friend Eric Harris opened fire on their classmates and teachers at Columbine High, killing 13 people. Some of the initial panic, as you can see, was captured by a surveillance camera in the school's cafeteria. It's been 8 months since that awful April day, and the deep wounds in the community of Littleton, Colorado, were recently reopened when the town's sheriff allowed reporters to see other home videos of Klebold and Harris, chilling tapes that the teenage killers made shortly before their rampage. They spoke of their increasing rage, their intense hatred of blacks, Hispanics, Jews, gays, and high school jocks, and their hopes and plans to murder 250 people. The question of why kids kill haunts America at the end of this decade, which has seen a slew of school shootings along with individual crimes, such as the murder of a Michigan man by Nathaniel Abraham, who was 11 years old when he fired the fatal shot. Nathaniel, now 13, was recently tried as an adult and convicted of second-degree murder. Joining us now to help make sense out of all of this is two people whose lives were forever changed back in April. Brooks Brown was friends with Dylan Klebold and at one time with Eric Harris, who warned him to stay away from the school shortly before the massacre began. He also was the only acquaintance of the gunman to be singled out and named by Sheriff John Stone as possibly being connected to the crime. Last week, Brooks was officially exonerated when a Sheriff's Department official announced, quote, "There is no evidence suggesting Brooks Brown was in any way involved in these murders," end quote. Brooks and his mother, Judy, both join us now from Denver. Hi there. Thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan.
Brooks, I have to ask you very quickly before we get to the topic I really want to get to is, how does it feel to finally have been exonerated by the Sheriff's Department?
It's kind of weird. It's still surreal. The entire event since Columbine doesn't even seem like it happened. I mean, all the news people, everything still doesn't seem real, and Sheriff Stone still hasn't exonerated me himself. The Sheriff's Department has, and it really doesn't seem that different because the FBI told us when they were investigating us a month and a half into it, they told me I had nothing to do with it in the first place, and I was only a witness.
I want to
so it's kind of like I knew all along.
I want to talk about Dylan Klebold. I mean, Brooks, Judy, you both knew Dylan Klebold well. Judy, let me start with you. You saw Dylan Klebold growing up. You watched him go from a child to an adult. Is there anything that you can say now in retrospect, as the year ends, as you've had time to think about this, to think about what happened, where you say to yourself, you know, now that I think about what Dylan was like, maybe there were some warning signs?
Now that I've seen the tape and the videos of Dylan and Eric, it confirmed what I believed all along, that the rage they felt started in the schools, not in his home. It's what I suspected. It's what I knew. I knew how Dylan was raised. We raised our kids together. It did not happen in the home. He was happy with his job. It happened in the school. He mentioned it in the tapes. I heard him mention it. I knew it was going to be there. I knew that was the reason.
Did you and Brooks both see this videotape of Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold spouting off before they committed this crime?
No, Randy and I have seen it. Brooks is not able to see it.
All right, now you've seen this tape. You're thinking, I knew that kid. That kid used to spend time at my house. And there he is, cursing the world, talking about his hatred for every ethnic group, including his own. Is there any lesson to be learned? I mean, is there anything that a parent can see before it happens, now that you've seen both the before and the after?
Well, I'll tell you what was odd about watching the tapes. I saw the same Dylan. His actions, his body mannerisms were exactly the same. The words were, however, more violent than I ever knew he could talk about. So that was different. But certainly in this case, I have a lot of things to let parents know about the school system. You can nurture your child at home, but if they aren't nurturing your child and taking care of your child in that school, and if your child is allowed to be humiliated and not protected, this can build up a rage. Dylan was a very, very sensitive child, and he would tell no one about the humiliation, and he held it all inside. And I believe this is what caused this rage. Certainly, he had no right to do what he did.
Brooks, you made that videotape we're seeing there of Dylan Klebold. When you now think back, and that was, what, 6 months before the murders?
Yeah.
And there you are, sitting with Dylan in the school auditorium. You worked on plays with him. Totally normal kid? I mean, apart from at the time as to what you thought.
Yeah, he was, as far as I could tell, he was just a nice, shy guy at the time. That's all I could tell. I didn't know much different. He was funny. He was smart. He knew how to do his technical stuff. He was fun to do with the plays with. He was normal, I guess, as far as any of my friends can go.
And that's, of course, referring to the fact that all of your friends are a little bit off, right?
Yeah, a little different than most people.
Judy, let me ask you about Sue Klebold, the mother of Dylan Klebold. She must be looking back on this every day, thinking to herself, what could I have done? I think, again, as we look back on this crime at the end of the year now, some people are still looking at the parents, still saying the parents should have done more. How could these kids have obtained these weapons, made these videos? The parents never would have found out. You still talk to Sue Klebold on a regular basis. What is she thinking about that?
We talk quite openly about it. She has nothing to hide. In the first place, a lot of those things didn't take place in the Klebold house that I am aware of and that she is aware of. Sue wants the answers too. I'm asking kids. I'm trying to find out any clue we can get. This part of Dylan's personality, I'm not getting anything, and we want the answers. Sue was not aware of this behavior in her child. I wouldn't be defending Sue, believe me. You have to remember that Dylan that day meant to kill both my children. I had a child in the cafeteria, and Dylan knew he was in the cafeteria. I would not be defending this mom if I thought that she knew, even though she was a good friend. This mom did not know, and this was a good, nurturing mom. And could not have known? I mean, let's accept the fact that she didn't know, but I think still a lot of people are saying, but she should have known, even if she didn't. You know, that is hard to believe, but I know what she knows, and I will tell you, I did not share the web pages with her in the beginning, and I've explained that that's quite complicated. Until after the tragedy did I share the web pages with her. When I shared the web pages with her, she said, oh my, Eric is such an angry child. She had never known that. I thought the police had taken care of it and told them. Wendy Murphy, you've dealt with a lot of cases involving child abuse and the like. Does this sound like a normal pattern? Parents who really had no idea what was happening to their kids? And we're not just talking to a parent, we're also talking to a friend who's saying, yeah, I was spending time with them and there was nothing particularly abnormal, violent, weird about him.
You know, it's so difficult in these cases because I think schools and families are inclined to point the finger at each other, in part because they're looking for someone to blame as well. And they're tough cases as well because we tend to say, with hindsight, maybe I should have noticed this. With hindsight, I should have noticed that. But I don't think either the school or the parent is necessarily fully responsible. I think it's a joint issue, a joint problem. And part of the solution really has to be greater communication between schools and families and other community resources, because this lack of conversation, the lack of communication is really part of the problem. Obviously, Dylan had a sense that he had no one to talk to about whatever he was going through. That shouldn't be. No matter whose fault it is, no child should feel that way. John Burris, both families are being sued. Does this new videotape of Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris saying their parents didn't know anything help the parents?
I think it can, in one sense, in the sense that it basically said they didn't have any knowledge. The real question on negligent supervision, though, is whether or not they should have known and could have known. And did they take the kind of reasonable steps that you would expect a parent to do with respect to their children? I mean, what did they really do? I mean, it's really phenomenal to me that this kind of evidence can be in a person's house or having access to it and the parents not know something. On the other hand, I will say this. teenagers can be very resourceful and can be very tricky and very sneaky. So it can't happen. But somewhere along the line, there should have been some cues. I don't think the school itself should be fundamentally responsible from a liability point of view, because really, without having some real notice on the part of these kids, or that some kind of activity is going to take place, you can't have a public school being the guarantor of everyone's there. There may be things they can do in order to try to get at these issues on a more sociological point of view, but really, short of having armed guards, it's pretty difficult to make a school district totally responsible.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll talk more about the Columbine case, in addition to the case of that 11-year-old Nathaniel Abraham in Michigan and other kid killers. Is there anything we can do? Talk about it when we come back.
Two girls sitting next to you, they probably want you to shut the up too. Jesus, Rachel and January, little, like, Rachel and Jim, you're stuck up little bitch. Christianity, God's little whores. What would I do? I would shoot you in the motherfucking head. Don't bully, let God crucify that asshole.
That tape of conversations between Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris on this videotape they left for the police. Brooks Brown, you know, when you listen to that videotape, have you, by the way, is this the first time you've heard it, or have you heard it on television? And...
That's pretty much the first time I've heard that section.
Yeah, what are you thinking as you're hearing that?
All like that.
It's kind of mind-blowing. Crap, I can't believe it.
Yeah.
It's like, what the hell?
Let me ask you a question. If I had come up to you before this all happened and said to you, you know, a couple guys I'm trying to find a little bit out about, what's the rap on this guy Klebold and Harris? What was sort of the scuttlebutt around school about what these guys were like before any of this happened?
Around school, or
yeah.
What would I say?
No, well, why don't we first go with around school?
Let's see. Probably get what they're saying now. They were into voodoo, witchcraft. They dressed in makeup. They were gay.
That's what other students in the school were saying about him?
That's what they said in the Time article that just came out.
Yeah.
And they said that about me too. All of Eric and Dylan's friends, which I was really happy about.
And what would you have said about them being a friend of Dylan Klebold's and at one time a friend of Eric Harris's?
If you would ask me, I'd say Eric is a smart guy who is really just fun to talk to. He's a person that you can actually hold a conversation with, who can understand everything you say. Dylan, you can sit and joke around with and laugh, and he'll make jokes. He's a fun guy to talk to. They're both fun people to hang around with. This is just what I would have said.
Yeah, no, I believe this. It's just crazy. Mickey Sherman, let me go to you for a minute. If there had been a trial, let's say Dylan Klebold and Eric Harris hadn't killed themselves. Let's assume that they were 16. I mean, they were 17, 18. As a result, I think there's no question they would have been tried as adults. What if they were 15 and 16 and they committed the same crimes? Would there be any way to try them within a juvenile system in any state where the public wouldn't say, no way, we want them tried as adults?
Not in the 1990s, Dan. Right now, we want people tried as adults if they do something bad, regardless of their age. Witness the case that we're going to talk about in a few minutes. And especially when they've done such a heinous crime. You know, maybe Father Flanagan was wrong. Maybe there is such a thing as a bad boy. And as much as I hate to admit it, I agree with Wendy Murphy that this is a situation where, you know, you can't blame the schools, you can't blame the parents. You know, sometimes there are demons within people that we can't predict, but just thank God that this is aberrational. Not that many kids out there like these kids.
I totally disagree with that.
Go ahead.
It's mind-blowing because in every way I disagree with that. I've known Dylan, my mom's known Dylan since I was in first grade. Dylan was not in any way a violent kid. Dylan had no violent tendencies. He had no secret side. He was in first grade. I'm sure in first grade he wasn't going home making pipe bombs. There was something that fostered and created him to be a certain way. No one has a demon inside of them and this chemical imbalance like that.
So it's the school that made him into a killer?
Let me say that the principal of our school is out of touch. He is still out of touch. He will not admit that we have problems in our school. It's a public school of 2,000 children. There are problems. This man walks around and acts like there are no problems in the school.
Wait a second. How can you possibly blame the school system for the murder of these children? I mean, let's be real.
We are not blaming them for the murder. We never said that. We are blaming them for the rage that the kids felt. I never said that I'm blaming them for the murder. Certainly not.
Well, Mrs. Brown,
but that goes to a question of harassment. I mean, what you're really talking about here, and we are making some strides about whether, certainly in the issue of sexual and gender-based discrimination, harassment. But the question really is, can a school district ultimately be responsible for every little harassment kind of thing that happens amongst kids?
To respond to that directly, I think what you need to do is you need to realize, yeah, the monster in Frankenstein was guilty of what he did. But you got to look at the doctor. You got to look at the school. You got to look at the society. You have to look at everything. I'm not saying they're guilty. The two people who are guilty are dead. And if there's a hell, may they burn in it. They killed my friends. They destroyed my life and everyone else in my community. But you know what? My community did something, okay? You know what? Dylan's family? Probably not. The school? I know they did because I lived in there and I existed in there for 4 years. And it was not fun in any way.
Can I ask you a question, Brooks? It's Wendy Murphy. Now that you know what you know, and now that you've basically acknowledged that you would never have guessed your friends, your associates were capable of killing, if you saw friends like that again, or if you saw two kids in your school behaving in similar ways today, would you report them? Would you tell an authority figure? Would you be more suspicious about the potential for violence, or would you do the same thing and just say, I didn't see it coming?
I'll do the same exact thing I did before because not everyone's an Eric and Dylan.
How can a school district be responsible if no one is going to come forward?
Because
exactly my point, John.
The jocks sit there, and the jocks get away with everything at Columbine, and they always have and they always will. You can ask any kid except for the jocks because the jocks will deny it. Why? They get free rides.
Brooks, this is the real world. It's the real life. That happens in every school. That doesn't make people kill it.
We don't allow it in the business world. Why do we allow our children to be humiliated?
We're going to take a quick break. I promise Judy, I'll give you a chance to finish up in 1 minute. We'll be right back.
Marcel, they had to call Marcel, and Marcel said, Nate didn't shoot at anybody. Nate didn't shoot. I was standing right there. This little child said Nate didn't shoot at anybody. They called him in their case. James Ellis said, he didn't shoot at anybody. I saw him walk out of the yard with Marcel. They didn't run away. Marcel said, we didn't run away. I went home. What is this? Where is this? Why? Why would you do it? Why would you engage to get a little boy? Why? Why would you do this?
Attorney Jeffrey Feiger defending his client, 13-year-old Nathaniel Abraham, was 11 at the time of the crime. We'll come back to that in a moment. Judy Brown, I told you I'd give you an opportunity to respond. We were talking about Columbine responsibility, about schools' responsibility, and you had a comment you wanted to make.
I do have a comment. I want to say that I get so sick of hearing people saying there's always been harassment in the schools. That's life. Live with it. I get sick of that. I wish people would realize it needs to stop. It's over the line, and our teachers and principals need to stop looking the other way, and they need to stop it. I want my kid protected in the school the same way I protect them in the home. I expect that. Also, there was a red flag. We turned in the web pages. We turned in this kid to the police. They knew he was active. They knew he was into pipe bombs. Eric Harris. And the police looked the other way. We turned this kid into the police 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We called over and over. There were red flags in this case. The police let our community down.
And let me ask John Burse, why can't Judy Brown expect that there won't be harassment? And I mean legally, why can't she expect that? And if she doesn't get that protection for her son and other children in that school, why can't they sue the school district?
I think that there's a movement toward that, and I don't think that I disagree with that. It's a question of what the notice is and what the procedures are. Once the school district has a procedure in place, kids do have to come forward and identify with it, but it's a whole can of ball of worms when you're talking about kids doing harassment. Certainly, if perpetual harassment is taking place, the district has notice, they should have a procedure in place to correct it. And if they do not and something bad happens, of course they should be responsible. It seems to me that's easy.
Thank you.
Wendy Murphy, is this case, Columbine, and the Nathaniel Abraham case, 11-year-old committing murder, is this what we're going to see for the next century? Are we going to see more child killers, younger and younger? Are we going to see the laws change throughout the country so younger and younger kids are being tried as adults?
Well, I do think that there's some statistical support for that. Unfortunately, between 1983 and 1993, according to the Justice Department, although juveniles were not committing large numbers of crime comparatively, they were committing vastly more murders, disproportionately more murders compared to adults, and they were committing them at younger and younger ages. The states naturally reacted by lowering the age at which juveniles can be transferred and tried in adult court, and they also tried a lot of get tough programs and get tough policies. And frankly, I'm not sure that that was the wrong choice, but I think that what we didn't do right and what we still need to do better is spend a lot more money on intervention, early intervention and prevention programs, and we're not doing that very well right now. We also need to accept the fact that when we say, particularly in the aftermath of the school shootings, when we say, look, we should have seen, you know, hindsight has got to become foresight. We should notice these red flags and so forth. We have to understand what that means. That means that school officials are going to be profiling kids in a sense. They're going to be saying, I see a lot of red flags here, and although I don't really see a particular threat, I think we need to take some action against this child. The ACLU has come out strong against profiling kids or recognizing red flags as such because they think it imposes on children's freedom. Well, I say, you know, kids don't need that much freedom in schools in particular.
Mickey, does it impose on their freedoms?
It may, but I kind of agree again with Wendy in some of these respects. I think that the better technique is not to torture the criminal justice system and pass these feel-good legislation laws, which is what they are, because an 11-year-old does not belong in the adult criminal justice system. Better off, let's get in an intervention program, counseling, and better parenting.
Yeah, I think with the Abraham case as well, if they had been tougher with intervention earlier, they could have saved that kid and saved those lives. But by, unfortunately, waiting till the sensational case came along without being more forthright and tougher earlier, you created this kind of problem.
But John, isn't tougher intervention, getting in earlier, sort of the easy way out for everyone to look back on it and say, we should have done more before?
Well, of course, that's always you can look in hindsight. I'm just saying you got to be forthright and forward thinking about what are you putting in place. It is very easy when a kid comes through, you can say it's just a minor offense. And when you get 3 or 4 of these, you ought to say we ought to do something about it. And I don't think that we did anything in that Abraham case when we could have, given the number of contacts that he had. And maybe if that had happened, he might have had a more responsible view of the whole the world.
Yeah, and Mickey, you were going to say something?
Yeah, and going towards the intervention issues is a lot better than, as I said, torturing the criminal justice system, perverting it, if you will, and making 11-year-olds and 13-year-olds going through the system and being treated as adults.
Let me
that
makes
no sense.
Very quickly, Wendy.
But Mickey, look,
10 seconds.
we have to accept the fact that if 13-year-olds are now capable, as a society, capable of committing murder, we have to accept the fact that they may well have to subject themselves to criminal prosecution.
Mickey,
kids are different these days.
Got to cut it off. Judy and Brooks Brown, I know this has been a tough topic. Thanks a lot for joining us. I appreciate it. Thanks to all my guests. Tomorrow and Upfront tonight, drunk drivers, the real Y2K danger. I'll see you back here tomorrow night.